Joining us now, the president and CEO of Pennsylvania Family Support Alliance, Angela Liddle. Angela helped Pennsylvania lawmakers rewrite that state's Child Protective Services law in the wake of the Penn State Jerry Sandusky scandal. And her organization works with clergy and staff across the state, helping them recognize and report child abuse. I just want to get your take initially on what we learned in this grand jury report.
Well, I think it's a hard read for anyone. It is a very dark and somber time in Pennsylvania. As you read the words of victims, as you read things from the secret archives, and then the words of the grand jurors, it's a tough time.
It is tough, to put it mildly, as you say. You also said that this points to the Catholic Church and that, in your words, it's like organized crime. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think that there are those in leadership who have tried to minimize this by saying, well, you know, there were essentially a few bad eggs and it's a new day. And the reality is that doesn't near do justice to the magnitude of what actually was perpetrated against likely more than 1,000 child victims, now survivors. The church went at great lengths to cover this up. They moved priests. They paid priests. They silenced families with hush money. They flat out lied in media reports. They disclosed only what they wanted to, and very little at that. And so truly, this was, on every level, a very large cover-up. As the Attorney General said yesterday, they tried to cover up the cover-up.
As we look at this, the church's statement in terms of this, noting the report illustrates the pain of those who have been victims of the crime of sexual abuse by individual members of our clergy and by those who shielded abusers and so facilitated an evil that continued for years or even decades. Going on to say they're grateful for the courage of the people who aided the investigation and shamed by and sorry for the sins and omissions by Catholic priests and Catholic bishops. The Vatican, as we just learned from Jean, no comment at this point. This is something that this Pope, who has been praised on a number of other efforts, has had mixed reviews, to say the least. Is there any leadership at this point that can come from the Pope that can make a real difference? Because something needs to be done.
Well, it absolutely does. And the reality is now is not a time for no comment. It's also not a time to do as Bishop Gaynor did yesterday in the local media here in Pennsylvania and say, yeah, you know, there were these two priests in 2014 and they actually admitted to raping and molesting children. And their punishment was to live the rest of their lives in prayer and penance. That's not how our law operates. And it's time now for the church to really speak and behave as if they have to follow the law like everyone else does. And very clearly, this happened because they believed they were above the law.
This report looks specifically at 6 dioceses in the state of Pennsylvania, but we can put up on the screen around this country 19 different dioceses that have actually filed for bankruptcy protection because of sex abuse settlements. And we talk often about how this is not just in the United States. This is a global issue for the Catholic Church, which is why there has been so much pressure for Pope Francis to speak out. You say one of the other things that needs to come out of this is we need to start believing children, which survivors and victims would certainly agree with you on. Among the jury's recommendations, though, the grand jury's recommendations, and we can put those 4 up on the screen there, they also want to eliminate the statute of limitations for sexually abusing children. That's been a little tougher to move forward in Pennsylvania.
Well, it has, and it has been largely because of the strong lobbying base of the Catholic Church. They have put much of their resources into trying to shut down these legislative efforts, just as they put resources into silencing families. And it's time now to use those funds in a more productive way. We absolutely support the elimination of the statute of limitations. I'm hoping that the magnitude of this, and really the outcry from the public, it's time for the public to get involved in this and demand there be change and action, very different from what we have historically seen.
And part of that may come through hearing the brave stories of some of these folks who have come forward. An 83-year-old man who we heard from yesterday, and another woman who said the abuse started at 18 months. Angela Liddle, appreciate you joining us and appreciate the work you're doing.